Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. In Myanmar's capital, Naypyidaw, police have fired gunshots into the air to disperse protesters defying a ban on gatherings amid nationwide outrage at last week's coup. Police initially used water cannon and tried to push a large crowd back, but demonstrators responded with projectiles. Protesters have been rallying for the fourth consecutive day, calling for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and for democracy to be restored. A top-level army huddle has reaffirmed Pakistan's support to Kashmiri's struggle for freedom. Presided over by Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi, the Corps Commanders Conference reviewed internal and regional security situation. The meeting reiterated that peace in Afghanistan is key to regional stability. Experts from the World Health Organization say coronavirus is unlikely to have leaked from a Chinese lab in Wuhan. A team of scientists investigating the origins of the virus made the assessment after visiting Wuhan. The virus has now infected more than 106 million people worldwide and has claimed over 2.3 million lives. Of them, 12,066 have died in Pakistan. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stopped short of endorsing the occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel. In an interview, Blinken said if the situation in Syria changed over time, the U.S. will look at it then. Former President Donald Trump officially granted recognition of the Golan as Israeli territory in 2019. And in cricket, England have crushed India by 227 runs in the first test at the Chidambaram Stadium in Chennai. Chasing a target of 420 runs, the hosts were bowled out for 192. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We begin in Myanmar, where in the capital city of Naypyidaw, police have fired gunshots into the air to disperse protesters defying a ban on gatherings amid nationwide outrage at last week's coup. Police initially used water cannon and tried to push a large crowd back, but demonstrators responded with projectiles. Protesters have been rallying for the fourth consecutive day, calling for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and for democracy to be restored. But the army defends the coup, saying there were irregularities in last year's election. It pledged to hold fresh elections and hand power over to the winning party once a year-long state of emergency ends. UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, Tom Andrews, has proposed sanctions on the country's military. And in Pakistan, a top-level army huddle has reaffirmed its support to Kashmiri's just struggle for freedom. The Corps Commanders meeting was held in Rawalpindi and was presided over by Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa. The forum also reviewed regional and internal security with special focus on situation along the borders. It said hostile agencies' plans to disrupt peace, particularly in Balochistan and Gilgit, have been exposed to the entire world. The Army Chief expressed satisfaction over the professional readiness of the Army to thwart any threat. General Bajwa said the return of international cricket in the country is a result of numerous sacrifices made to eliminate terrorism. Discussing recent developments in Afghanistan, the meeting reiterated Afghan peace is key to regional stability. And in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, a complete shutdown is being observed to mark the 8th martyrdom anniversary of Kashmiri leader Muhammad Afzal Guru. The All-Parties Hurriyat Conference and other pro-freedom organizations called for the shutdown. More in this report.
Thousands of personnel of Indian Army, police and paramilitary forces have been deployed to prevent any protests. In a statement, the Jammu and Kashmir National Front said that the execution was a ruthless murder of justice. They said there is no justice for Kashmiris in Indian courts as they have become a tool in the hands of the government. In 2013, India secretly executed Guru with plausible proof after accusing him of the involvement in the 2001 Parliament attack. His family still awaits the return of his remains, which were buried in the Indian jail, where he was kept in solitary confinement for 12 years. Meanwhile, Indian occupying forces have arrested several youths, including a woman in Srinagar and Shopian districts.
Also in occupied Kashmir, the family members of a teenage boy killed in a fake encounter have been charged under an anti-terror law for holding a protest to demand the return of his body. Mehbooba Mufti, the former chief minister of the Muslim-majority region, expressed her outrage over the case on Twitter. More details in this report.
Thousands of personnel of Indian Army, police and paramilitary forces have been deployed to prevent any protests. In a statement, the Jammu and Kashmir National Front said that the execution was a ruthless murder of justice. They said there is no justice for Kashmiris in Indian courts as they have become a tool in the hands of the government. In 2013, India secretly executed Guru with plausible proof after accusing him of the involvement in the 2001 Parliament attack. His family still awaits the return of his remains, which were buried in the Indian jail, where he was kept in solitary confinement for 12 years. Meanwhile, Indian occupying forces have arrested several youths, including a woman in Srinagar and Shopian districts.
Moving on, Twitter has refused the Indian government's request to remove over 1,000 more accounts linked to the farmers' movement. In a statement, the social media giant said it believes in an open and free exchange of information. Twitter added that the safety of employees is its top priority while also protecting the public conversation. Meanwhile, New Delhi police have arrested actor Deep Sidhu for alleged involvement in hoisting the flag at Red Fort on Republic Day. He had also been accused by farmer unions of trying to defame their agitation and termed him a traitor. Meanwhile, a farmers' union has announced to widen protest against farm laws with grand meets in Uttar Pradesh on February 16th and 23rd. In Afghanistan, 4 government employees have been killed in an attack by unidentified gunmen in Kabul. Police say the incident happened in the capital's Bagh-e-Daoud area. Meanwhile, a roadside bomb has killed 4 members of the Afghan security forces in the western Herat province. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. On Sunday, Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen condemned the recent surge in attacks on government officials. Beijing has denounced recent U.S. Navy exercises in the South China Sea, calling them detrimental to regional peace and stability. In a news briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin vowed to take necessary measures to safeguard national sovereignty. Wang said Beijing will work with regional countries to firmly safeguard peace and stability in the South China Sea. Earlier, the U.S. Navy said 2 U.S. carrier groups have conducted joint exercises in the sea. It said the exercises aimed at enhancing interoperability between assets as well as command and control capabilities. The exercise comes days after a U.S. warship sailed near Chinese-controlled islands in the disputed waters. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stopped short of endorsing the occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel. Former President Donald Trump officially granted recognition of the Golan as Israeli territory in 2019. In an interview, Blinken said if the situation in Syria changed over time, the U.S. will look at it then. The Secretary of State noted that the territory was important for Israel's security, but didn't identify it as Israel. However, he said the Syrian government and Iranian-backed militias posed a significant security threat to Israel. Blinken also reiterated the Biden administration's commitment to retain the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Earlier, Biden's advisors said he would not withdraw U.S. recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan. Moving on, Saudi Arabia says it is committed to a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan was speaking at an emergency meeting of the Arab League in Egypt's capital, Cairo. This report has more.
The meeting comes in the backdrop of talks between the rival Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah in Cairo. During his opening address, Arab League Secretary General said the Palestinian issue is the focus of Arab consensus. Ahmed Abul Ghaid called for the resumption of talks between Palestinians and Israel. Also speaking at the event, the Egyptian foreign minister said Cairo is working to ensure peace persists between Hamas and Fatah. Sameh Shoukry warned Israel against any change in the status of Jerusalem. In their closing statement, the ministers welcomed a ruling by the International Criminal Court on its territorial jurisdiction in Palestine, which concluded that it extends to territories occupied by Israel since 1967. The meeting also discussed the conflict in Yemen, with the Saudi foreign minister slamming Houthi attacks on civilian targets.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says North Korea developed its nuclear and ballistic missile program throughout 2020. This was disclosed in a report of UN Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee. The report said Pyongyang continued to seek material and technology for its programs from abroad in violation of international sanctions. The committee said North Korea used the money stolen in cyber hacks to fund the program. It noted it was highly likely that a nuclear device could be mounted onto long, medium, and short-range ballistic missiles. However, it was uncertain whether the developed ballistic missiles were resistant to heat generated during re-entry into the atmosphere. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department said Biden administration has planned a new approach to North Korea. And in a tit-for-tat move, Germany, Poland, and Sweden expelled Russian diplomats amid tensions over the arrest of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The move was carefully coordinated between the foreign ministries of the 3 EU countries. The 3 nations say their envoys were only performing their duties and were expelled unjustly. The Russian Foreign Ministry has called the move unjustified and unfriendly. It announced its expulsions last week while the EU foreign policy chief was meeting Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Later, upon his return to Brussels, Joseph Borrell said Moscow's move signifies that Europe and Russia are drifting apart. And experts from the WHO say coronavirus is unlikely to have leaked from a Chinese lab in Wuhan. The assessment was made after a team of scientists investigating the origins of the virus visited Wuhan. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.3 million lives and infected more than 106 million people so far. More on the pandemic in this report.
As the world evaluates data about vaccination drives and processes new information about mutant variants, it is becoming increasingly clear that the immunization will take months more than previously estimated. South Africa has switched to Johnson & Johnson vaccine after data showed AstraZeneca's was not as effective against the local variant. However, it said it may roll out the Oxford jab step by step to assess its ability to prevent severe illness instead of completely ending it.
We've proposed an alternative approach, a new approach to the way in which to roll out the vaccine. And one proposal that's currently being considered is to roll it out initially just in a stepped manner, where the first step includes about 100,000 individuals that are vaccinated, in which we monitor the hospitalization rates.
Over in Europe, France's healthcare system has reached a breaking point with tens of thousands of patients mounting every day. In the United Kingdom, scientists have renewed calls for sweeping border curbs to protect the country's vaccination program against new variants. Meanwhile, recently released state statistics in Russia show it was the world's third worst hit country in 2020 with over 160,000 fatalities. In the United States, Republican Representative Ron Wright has passed away after contracting COVID-19, making him the first member of Congress to die from the disease. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden said the Trump administration provided inaccurate information to his team about the national crisis.
When we started to try to figure out what we were going to do when we came into office, because there wasn't much of a transition, we didn't have, we weren't given a lot of information. And some of the information we had turned out not to be accurate in terms of vaccine supplies.
Meanwhile, Canada is not taking any chances and has extended the stay-at-home orders for Toronto by another 2 weeks. To uncomplicate the vaccination process of illegal migrants, Colombia has given temporary protective legal status to Venezuelan refugees.
Pakistan has recorded another 40 deaths from COVID-19 overnight, raising the death toll to 12,066. The health ministry says 1,008 new infections were detected since yesterday. The ministry says the infections tally has crossed 556,000. Over 512,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has topped 31,000. Meanwhile, phase 3 trials have shown that the Chinese vaccine being administered in Pakistan has a very high degree of efficiency. Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Health, Dr. Faisal Sultan, says it prevents 100% of patients against severe disease. Pakistan and Turkey have begun their 2021 joint military exercises titled Ataturk 11. The Pakistan Army Special Services Group and Turkish Special Forces are taking part. The 3-week-long drills kicked off with a special opening ceremony at the Special Service headquarters in Terbela. They will focus on counterterrorism, cordon and search, fire and move techniques, and close-quarter battle. Helicopter rappelling, compound clearance, and free-fall operations will also be part of the exercises. The Pakistan Army's media wing says the exercises will further strengthen bilateral relations. And we'll be back with more stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. The U.S. says it aims to strengthen economic and trade ties with Brazil, but will communicate concerns. At a White House press briefing, Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Washington will closely monitor Brazil's actions on human rights and climate. Psaki said President Biden announced an additional $300,000 in funding to bolster Brazil's COVID-19 response. She said the U.S. was the largest investor in Brazil and will continue to bolster trade relations in the months ahead. Meanwhile, Brazil welcomed the remarks, saying it looked forward to expanding trade ties with the U.S. while addressing the concerns. Earlier, the Democrat-led House slammed former President Donald Trump for cozying up to Brazil despite its disregard for human rights. Sudan has declared a state of emergency in the state of northern Kordofan following the violent protests. The state's governor said the curfew has also been declared to protect the lives of citizens and their properties. He said the protests in the state have been accompanied by acts of violence. Students have been protesting in Al Obeid in North Kordofan to demand the provision of basic necessities. However, the protests turned violent when demonstrators started burning public and private properties. And the Pakistan Army has resumed search and rescue operation to locate the missing climbers on K2 for the 4th straight day. Pakistan's Mohammad Ali Satpara, along with John Snorri from Iceland and JP Moore from Chile, went missing while descending K2. Pakistan military's media wing says the army would not leave any stone unturned in the search operation. Earlier, speaking to the media after reaching Skardu from the base camp, Sajid Ali Satpara said a rescue operation is only possible to search for the bodies. He confirmed the climbers scaled the peak on Friday and came across an accident while descending. The current weather conditions have made the search operation extremely difficult. Meanwhile, in India, the death toll from a glacier avalanche in the northern Uttarakhand state has risen to 28. Rescuers are searching for more than 200 missing people after part of Himalayan glacier fell into a river and triggered a huge flood. The violent surge swept away a small hydroelectric project and damaged a bigger one further downstream. Rescue workers are focusing on a 2.5-kilometer long tunnel where they say 30 to 35 people could be trapped. A team of scientists was also flown over to the site to find out what set off the avalanche. Earlier, officials say 25 people have been rescued so far. And the UAE's first mission to Mars is due to enter the red planet's orbit today. The HOPE probe project director Omran Sharaf says it's a very critical phase, which would define whether the probe reaches Mars or not. He says the spacecraft would crash on Mars if its speed is too slow and might skip landing on the planet while going too fast. Currently moving at over 120,000 kilometers per hour, it must fire its braking engines for 27 minutes to be sure of being captured by the red planet's gravity. The UAE authorities say HOPE probe will be the first investigation to provide a complete picture of the Martian atmosphere. The Mars mission has cost $200 million. The spacecraft was launched from Earth 7 months ago on the 19th of July last year. And now for the latest on business. European stocks have taken a backseat, bucking a positive trend seen in Asia and the U.S. at the start of the trading week. The Pan-European Stock 600, Frankfurt's DAX, and Italy's FTSE MIB have slipped marginally. London's FTSE has also dipped under the flat line fractionally, but the CAC 40 in Paris has managed to edge up slightly. Earlier, most Asian stocks gained over the global rally that saw U.S. stocks hit record highs. However, Australia's ASX 200 has bucked the trend, sliding nearly 1%. And Tesla says it has invested around $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, prompting a more than 10% jump in the cryptocurrency. Following the announcement, Bitcoin was up 12%, setting a new record high above $44,000. Tesla said it expected to begin accepting payments for its cars and other products with the cryptocurrency in the near future. The company added the decision was aimed at diversifying and maximizing its returns on cash. Earlier, Musk encouraged small-time investors to buy Bitcoin, saying it was on the verge of being accepted among investors. Meanwhile, the price of crude oil has risen above $60 per barrel for the first time in over a year. This was mostly fueled by a surprise cut in output by Saudi Arabia. The global benchmark Brent touched $60.2, up more than 15% since the start of the year. Meanwhile, West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. benchmark that briefly fell into negative territory last April, leaped above $57 a barrel. The oil prices rallied despite the reintroduction of lockdowns in many parts of the world. And it's time now to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.